All right, Improvisation Center is back again with, as you can see, the Scion. Unlike other videos where we're just fixing regular crap, this one's a little more jacked up because, well, the ass end is jacked up. Why? Because of some fuckboy in the truck running into the damn back end of this car and doing that right there. The hatch is fucked up, taillights are fucked up, bumper and probably the bumper pad underneath is fucked up, as well as this body panel. Get this hatch up enough here. Even this body panel section here is fucked up because it's pushed in. And as a result, even if I replace this hatch, which is something we're obviously going to have to do, all this has to get straightened out in order to allow the hatch to close. So if you remember a while back, we had to do a similar job on the tracker where I had to cut out an entire section of subframe in order to be able to weld in a whole new section of subframe so I could be able to get everything to line back up like it's supposed to. So that's going to be about the same situation here. So thing is, we got to start tearing some shit apart so we can see what we're working with, because we need to make us a little trip to the junkyard to source some parts, and in the worst case, probably have to hack out some of this shit here if this looks like it might be a little too jacked up to salvage. We will see though after I get everything loose. So go ahead and get started pulling some shit out. I have to get these interior panels out on either side, well as the bumper skin and the bumper pad underneath, which is a big old block of foam. And the biggest part is taking this hatch off, so, and the taillights. So go ahead and get started with this mess because, well, it's a mess. All right, got through stripping everything. As you can see, we got the hatch off, got the rear bumper and everything associated with it removed. Broken tail lights are gone. I even had to pull the interior panels on either side out because, well, got to get in here some kind of way. Now, as you can see here, this whole section of body subframe or whatever the hell you want to call it is bent in. So I could try to beat and manipulate this out and try to get it to line up somewhat, and probably not have it line up good enough for the hatch to seal and shit. Or I could just try to follow these different contours where these panels are welded in and start off by cutting that section of crumpled up panel out and then duplicating those cuts on a donor car and getting this same section of metal out so I could weld that, the newer one, back in. And worst case, I'll just have to straighten out these edges around where the tail lights mount at, because that'll be where the old metal stops. Another thing that'll need addressing is the hinges for our hatch. Because of the impact, it pulled these hinges up a little bit, so I'm gonna have to straighten these suckers out between the tabs and knocking this down enough to where it's back flush again, and then probably coming back over this with some weld so it'll at least try to hold a little bit better. Same thing on this side, got a little bit of some pull-up action right there, so we're gonna have to address that as well, because when I opened the hatch, the front edge of the hatch glass was rubbing up against this glass right here. Can't have that. And of course the hatch wasn't sitting firm to begin with because of it being jarred up like that. Now of course that hatch is also probably compromised on that end where the hinges bolt up to it, where that sheet metal, that stamped sheet metal, was probably pulled out some or otherwise distorted. So yeah, we're replacing a hatch, so that part won't have to be addressed, but we will have to deal with those hinges before we really continue on, as well as all this shit right here, which I'll go ahead and start on that next. I'm going to go ahead and start doing a little cutting and grinding of this section, taking my time to make sure I get just what I need out of here, so I'll know exactly what I need to cut out at the junkyard. Now the crazy thing is, at the junkyard, I could probably exercise a little more no caution, I guess you could say, because I don't have to get the precise cuts on the junkyard car to match up to this. I just need to hack however much metal out. Just take the sawzall and just go all the way around, leaving enough extra metal so if I do need that extra metal in here, I'll be able to go ahead and utilize that metal versus trying to get a precise cut on the junkyard car. So like I say, we're cutting out the back panel, so we'll at least have an idea of what we're working with and start getting all this crap put together. But first, well, I ain't gonna say first, after we get the panel cut out, our next move is gonna be junkyard time. So yep, off to the junkyard. All right, we're all done hacking out the section of twisted metal that we need to replace. As you can see, I followed the contours of where that panel was normally spot welded in place as best as I could. So again, like I say, we'll go ahead and cut out that replacement panel at the junkyard with a little extra metal just in case. So all I have to do is just shape it and weld it back in place. And some of these other panels had the advantage of being bolted down even when they're spot welded in other spots. So I was able to do that, and that'll kind of help me in aligning everything too with the bolts. So it's probably a good thing. But you can see we're pretty much off to a good start. Like I say, the main thing I'm looking at though, what I will probably have to do first is put the hatch on. So I will have to go to those hinges next and get those straight, so when we do put the hatch on, I'll be able to lower the hatch down, and then I could use the hatch as a gauge for how I need to do all this other metal, so everything will be nice and straight once it's all welded together. So with that, our next move is going to be going to the junkyard and getting all this garbage. So stand by. All right, we're at the junkyard. Found us a nice little specimen. Had everything we need. Already got the tail lights. Got our cutout panel right here that I can use to gauge everything. Take a quick look. We also got our hatch off right here. Hatch ain't in bad shape, but it's got a couple little dings on it. Nothing serious, nothing near like the other one. And like I say, we got tail lights right here. And we got our foam pad part, even the rear bumper skin. We got everything we need for this piece of crap. So last thing I got to do though is hack out this whole rear body member here so we can conclude this little session and get back to work on actually fixing this damn car. So I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. All right, we managed to get everything off of the junkyard car and loaded up and brought back to the house. Obviously, with this hatch being 2/3 glass, this was a bit nerve-wracking trying to go down some of these rough roads and highways with this thing, even with all the cushioning that I added to try to keep this thing safe. But we made it back, so the hard part is done. We got all the parts here, and like I said, everything's unloaded, ready to rock and roll. We got our tail lights, we've got the section of body member, the bumper skin, even though we could have saved this one, but this one's got a lot of little nicks and flaws that I would have had to work out of the thing before putting it back on, versus this one that I just have to repaint really. So yeah, it would probably save a little time just going ahead and repainting this one black before we put it back on. So got our foam right there. We're pretty much ready to rock and roll. Even got a pack of welding wire right there that just showed up in the mail. So we're ready to go. All I gotta do is first get our hatch on. Well, first we gotta get these hinges taken care of a little bit, get the hatch back on, then we could go ahead and start getting that thing on there. So let's go. We're moving. All right, one of the first things that we had to address on here are these hinges. I was able to tap these somewhat straighter than they were, but when I went to see if I could straighten this out right here, because the way it looked, it almost looked like they were kind of tack welded or spot welded in place the way this material was around here. But when I did a little more investigation, I found that the things were actually bolted in place. Kind of wish that I would have looked at that earlier, because I could have just removed the other ones at the junkyard, but it's neither here or there. So I took these old ones off and went ahead and beat on them some and straightened them out as best as I could. So hopefully these things will be at a level that will allow our new hatch to sit at a lower plane to be even with the glass here and actually be able to close flush enough with the rest of the body so everything else will also line up properly. So the only way we can find that out right now is to put the hatch on, because, well, that is the very next thing that I wanted to do so I can actually move on to everything else. So I'm gonna go ahead, get my help out here, and we're gonna muscle this thing into place. So, time to do it. One thing to make note of, in the process of trying to fit this hatch, having it in and out, for starters, the old hinges, because they were compromised, there really was no saving them in the original state. They were so distorted that it had the front end of the hatch too high, which caused it to bind with the intermediate glass panel. Can't have that, much less the idea that it wouldn't seal on the weather stripping. So short of taking a chance with another set of hinges that may or may not line up themselves, I had to do what I would typically do in the improvisation way, and that was cut, trim, and re-weld stuff to make it fit. And that's what we did right here. Cut this bottom part of the hinge off, trimmed the legs a little bit to shorten them. We re-welded everything back together and tried it again, and I did get it to fit where everything was pretty flush. The only problem this time was on the mounting holes. It seemed like everything was that way just a little bit too much when I bolted it down, and it would cause it to rub against this intermediate glass right here. So the only other option there, well, I'm not going to say the only option. The option I took on that was to widen these holes and try to elongate them going back. So when I mount everything, it'll end up coming back that way. That way we could see if I could get this thing to sit just a little bit back, just enough to where it's going to clear this glass right here. So I'm going to go ahead and remount this damn thing yet again and see how things turn out. One of the things that we still had to address with our new junkyard hatch is the wiring, because as I stated before, the original setup, they never accommodated us by having any kind of plug on the wire harness. So I had to actually pop the panels off the old hatch, remove the wiring harness from all the connectors on the tail lights, the latch, everything, and then pull the entire wire harness off the old hatch and pull it out from the little ceiling bushing thingy and leave it dangling right there. All that is from the old hatch. Same thing at the junkyard, but rather than try to remove everything, I just cut the wiring from the junkyard car and took the hatch off, rather than going ahead wasting all that time popping panels and doing all that crap there. So now I do have to take all this old wiring off this junkyard hatch so I can go ahead and put our original wiring back in its place. Now, of course, I'm not going to put the panels back up because I need to keep this latch open for the time being, because as I start messing around with fitting this new panel in right here, I'm going to be closing and opening this hatch, and I need to be able to manually pop this thing for two reasons. One, I don't know if this latch works. Two, the button that turns it on and off does not exist because that panel is gone. I have to source that from our old hatch. So for the time being, all this stuff's going to be open under here, so I could be able to at least manually pop this hatch if need be. All right, we got our wiring all resituated just the way it was from the factory, all in place. Everything's plugged up. And then one thing I also noticed too, I guess somebody had this situated when they still had this car in service and this panel might have been damaged before. They just took the wires going to the switch and just left the ends open so you could actually activate the hatch in order to release the thing. So at least we know the latch works. So for the time being, we could actually mess with that if we need to pop the thing. I still need to leave this panel open under here because I still need to install that panel, that switch panel on here. In order to do that, I need to be able to get back under here in order to get to the mounting studs and all that stuff. So with that all said and done, we can now start getting ready to get this fun part here addressed. All right, did a bunch of trimming on our new Junkyard panel to try to get it to where it's going to fit as good as possible within the opening on the body, and did a couple little light tack welds on either side there just to hold the thing in place. Had to cut those welds a couple of times and refit the panel as I tested our hatch. But right now where we're sitting, even though it's not done in the least, it is nowhere near done, but this position of this panel right now allows this hatch to close. It's latched, it's smooth on that side, smooth on that side. We're actually pretty good as far as how this hatch is sitting. Everything is nice and even. So now, with the panel sitting the way it is, I could actually start burning all this metal in on the end. I'll start on the ends first. This end here, I'm going to have to try to stretch this out, and I might need to add some filler metal in there to fill that gap in. So, like I say, just like on the other ones, if we have to add metal, we add metal, but we can start welding all that garbage in. Along, same thing with the bottom too. Get it along the bottom, get all that filled in, and then what we will have to do is these taillight panel sections of the body, I'm going to have to pull those out or knock them out or whatever in order to get them to be even with the top of this panel right here as well. So then I can start welding that in and be able to have the tail lights actually sit flush with the sides of the hatch. So we're getting it in little by little. All right, even after our initial tack welds around these areas here and here, I have to get that area a little bit better. But my next area of focus is right here along this cut where this taillight panel remains. Some of this was a little distorted on both sides and had to be straightened out. As you can see, I got a C-clamp in place. Another thing I had to take into account were these brackets right here on both sides, because they're actually used for holding a spot on these panels in place. And they have these little loop things. I have to show you that crap right here. These things here, these are from another car, the other car. But I had to make sure all that stuff lines up, because this section of the taillight panel has two bolts right here. Yeah, get a better angle right there, two bolts. I had to make sure all this crap lines up with our replacement panel so this could go back on along with that bracket on both sides. So we had to do a little manipulating and get it to where everything is lined up decently. Had to do some minor trimming along here to get everything to fit smoothly enough so when I start burning metal, it'll all fit together pretty good. Now, because of right here I have a bit of a gap, I'm going to have to fill that in with some extra metal. No big deal. This side here is not as bad. So I'm gonna get this side first because I got the C-clamp in place. But go ahead and weld all that up, get some more welds in there, and then I'll move on over to this side. Probably I might not have to put the C-clamp on there, but get some more welds. I'm not gonna fully weld it because the next thing I need to do is actually put our bumper shield, or not bumper shield, our actual bumper, the metal beam, in place, and then maybe do a test fit with the tail lights and the bumper skin so I can see how all this crap is gonna fit, so I can make sure that everything still lines up with our hatch when it's closed, because I don't want to do a finish weld and then find out something is off still. So go ahead and get some more welding in, and then we could go ahead and start doing some test fitting of crap. Stand by. Okay, we got some more welding done along this seam right here. I put a little piece of metal in there to help fill that gap some. Welded a little bit on the inside there to help reinforce it, which I'm gonna have to do anyway, but just got it done now. Same thing on this side here. Didn't have to add any metal, but I added a little line of weld along that joint. Nice little shitty popcorn weld there. That's what you get with these little Cracker Jack box flux core welders, but hey, gotta have the perfect conditions to get the perfect weld. But we got that done right there. Same thing in this little seam right here, both sides. Took a spell to grind it down a little bit to make it somewhat flush. I'll probably hit it again later. Also, I put my tail lights in so I could go ahead and test fit everything. Also have our inner bumper there. Got to put that up right here along these mounting points. I'll come back later and weld this after I ensure everything is going to fit properly, because as before I said, I don't want to weld all this garbage up and then end up having to cut or knock out metal or whatever to line stuff back up again. So we're going to get this bumper on, the foam pad, and the bumper skin, and see how all this garbage fits. So let's go. All right, as we can see, our bumper fits pretty good. The hatch is closed. The hatch was already lined up pretty good. Our taillights are pretty straight. I have to secure them, of course, but they're seated in there. And as we could see, the bumper, like, see right there, once I secure that tail light, everything lines up nicely. I, of course, have to secure that shit there. Same thing on that side, but everything is pretty good for all intents and purposes. Got a little minor gap right there, but nothing too serious. I have to secure everything first, but we could see the bumper skin sets exactly as it needs to. We open this hatch again. Of course, we have a couple mounting points right here we have to address when we do our final assembly. Once we got that all taken care of, this bumper skin is pretty much going to sit exactly as it should, along with the tail lights sitting as they should from the factory. So with that all said and done, I could take all this crap back apart again and go ahead and start welding shit together permanent. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and start getting this crap wrapped up. Areas I'm going to have to fill in with some metal along the bottom, along the right side as I did in the beginning. Just more or less just start burning some metal. Go ahead and get this crap done so I can start getting the rest of this stuff put back together, wrap this whole project up. Finally. All right, we got the panel all welded in real good all around, inside and out. Made sure we had plenty of filler in there. Even in some spots we had to add some metal in order to fill some of the bigger gaps, but in the end we got it all done. Even took a minute to use the grinding wheel to grind some of the lumpier slag on the weld, since again, flux core welder, popcorn welds, sometimes it's a little hard to avoid in these circumstances, but in the end smoothed it down. Also went and took a little bit of time to wipe everything down, because for aesthetics and protection's sake, I'm going to spray some paint over all this shit to cover it all up, because this is bare metal around the welds and everything, and the last thing we need is for all this crap to rust out and end up falling apart sometime in the future. So I'm going to go ahead, get all this stuff painted up, even shoot a little bit of paint on the inside to cover up the raw sections of weld and everything. Then we can start putting all this trash back together once and for all. Alright, got this whole panel and surrounding area spray painted. Put a couple coats on it to ensure its coverage inside and out. Got it all painted up wherever there were welds and bare metal. It's all painted up. So now, with all that said and done, the paint's dry, and now I can start assembling everything. I'm going to start off with the bumper, put all that hardware on there, get our tail lights put in, and go ahead and start doing the final assembly with the bumper skin, and verify, just for the sake of argument, that everything still lines up right, and go ahead and start buttoning everything up. Got the weather stripping, interior panels, interior panels, just all the crap that I pulled out, got to go back in. Alright, we got everything put back on, got everything snugged up, and got everything masked off. Took the time to remove all the crap from back here, the third brake light, all that stuff, because, well, before I put anything else back on there, I have to spray this hatch. So, I'm going to get to that. One thing I did make note of, there are a couple of spots on here where things aren't perfectly lined up, like about right here where the tail lights meet at the side of the hatch here, both sides. The taillights are a little more recessed in, which you can kind of see right there. And that's probably because of the idea that this whole panel section on both sides is just a little too far in. Now, that's going to be an unfortunate circumstance because, well, in order to remedy that, it would call for everything to get ripped right back apart, welds to be cut, and probably a whole bunch of beating on the body that may further compromise those areas right there. So it's one of these situations where you kind of take what you can get out of the deal and not run the risk of screwing up the body any more than it already is. We could try to remedy this situation, but like I say, there's a few things going against us. One is time. Number two is the idea of possibly causing more damage in other areas, trying to straighten out that one little area on both sides. So, for all intents and purposes, we're going to just kind of roll with it for now. And, hey, just go ahead and get this thing back on the road again because can't afford to have this car down. So, in the meantime, I'm going to blast some paint. Alright, we got the whole ass end sprayed with almost 2 cans of semi-gloss spray paint. Also went ahead and took the time to put the third tail light and the license plate lights and our hatch switch panel back on just as well after the paint dried down. But as we could see, everything is looking pretty decent here. To most, it would almost look like the car was never in an accident in any capacity. Still got a few things left to do, Got to put our spoiler on that I pulled off of the other hatch, as well as put the interior back together. But for all intents and purposes, all our other shit is in good shape. I also took the time to throw a little paint around these edges right here, because this hatch being gray, once I put the panels back on the inside, you'll have these edges right here that are still going to be showing, and that would just look a little tacky if they were gray over a black outer surface. So I went ahead and sprayed that down, so at least it'll look somewhat decent. Same thing going down there on the side pillars, but yeah, sprayed all that stuff black. Yeah, pretty much done almost. Like I say, just the interior. Put the spoiler back on, do a little bit of button up, and we're done. Even got a little backup camera I got to put back on. Once that's done, we're done. So let's go. Finish up time. All right, we got our spoiler put back on, and at the same time I also put the backup camera back on as well. So with all that, I actually put a little bit of leftover spray paint on the spoiler. Did it carefully enough so I didn't have any overspray on any of the other stuff. But spoiler's on, camera's on. At this rate, now I can go ahead and start putting the interior panels back on, wrap this shit up. So go ahead and get these panels back on. I'll spare you the boredom of watching me snap panels back on, so stand by. All right, we're pretty much done. Got all our interior panels put back on. Hatch is all covered up with its panels. My little wiring right there for the backup camera is all tucked away as I had it before. Got the all that crap on the outside is shown before, along with the spoiler. All the side panels are put back on as intended. Even managed to fix the fuel door now, so that thing works like it's supposed to. And of course all the body work, tail lights, all that good crap, everything is put back together. This car is pretty much brought back from total out status, more or less. So yeah, I'm done. Finished cleaning up, going inside. You know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, notifications, comments, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more. I will catch you later.